This is TWiT.
It is early to talk about this because it was only announced yesterday, but it is, to me, maybe the most interesting and could be most important story of the year.
Wait, can we guess?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Libra. Yes.
Yeah. Facebook's cryptocurrency. And already, France has said, hold on there, big boy. You're not so fast, Mark Zuckerberg. As has the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. This is going to be Maxine Waters, this is going to be a very interesting story. It's not going to happen till next year. And it takes some understanding, and a little bit of research to really get what's going on. I'm going to refer, because I think they are the smartest guys out there, to the Wired article by Stephen Levy and Gregory Barber, The Ambitious Plans Behind Facebook's Cryptocurrency, Libra. The deal is complicated. First of all, maybe it's not even quite appropriate to call it Facebook's, because, as Facebook will point out, Libra is a nonprofit out of Switzerland, global coin, the Libra Association. They're the Switzerland of digital coinage. The technology is open sourced. The control of the blockchain will be out of Switzerland. The Libra Association will consist of up to 100 founding members, of which Facebook is just one. Each of them will put in $10 million to fund the association and receive interest earned off the reserve. It's an NGO, in other words. Actually, no, I'm sorry.
I have some skepticism about this part, but keep going.
There will be NGO members. Libra is not an NGO, but it is a nonprofit. Right. Each member will be empowered. I guess it is ultimately a non-governmental organization, though, in the most truest sense of the word, because, and this is what scares banks and scares governments, it will be a global currency, not pegged to the U.S. dollar, but tied to the dollar, the yen, the euro.
Could I throw out a challenge just now for just a second, just for as the discussion continues, is to think about this as if Facebook were not mentioned at all, right? To take that angle out of it and say, does this make sense? Is this a good thing for people? Is this a bad thing for people? Then we can add Facebook back in, and there's perfectly legitimate things to talk about there, is whether or not they're a proper.
You're right, because Facebook kind of tilts it. If you say Google,
before you do that,
I want to think about the theory of this too. Go ahead, Stacey.
Okay, so we totally can. But before you do that, I want to bring up the fact that I have, in covering technology, I'm sure you guys have seen this too, there are tons of independent standard settings boards or organizations that have been created but are yet dominated by one member. And I think it's important when we're talking about this to understand how much Facebook has here. It does say that it eventually will step back, but we have no guarantees there. There's a lot of decision-making that happens in these organizations, and it's entirely possible for an organization with 100 different groups involved to still be dominated by one or two major players. That's all I want to say.
Fred Wilson.
Yes, you're right.
Maybe great investor Fred Wilson says, think of Facebook as the Satoshi of Bitcoin, the creator of Bitcoin, and Libra coin like Bitcoin. In other words, Satoshi released it into the world. Facebook came up with the technology and is open sourcing it. I think it's also important to say that Facebook understands the value of this not being Facebook. Some of the articles out there have described this as Zuckbucks. That's the phrase I like. And Facecoin. If it's that, it's dead in the water, says Marcus. I'm not sure who Marcus is.
That is David. Is it David Marcus?
He's the Facebook executive who came up with this. Yeah. Yes. Okay. He was president of PayPal.
Yes.
So here's how the Levy article begins. Near the end of 2017, on a Dominican Republic beach with his family, Facebook executive David Marcus wrestled with a question he'd been pondering since his previous job as president of PayPal. How would you build the Internet of Money? A friction-free global digital currency would be a boon for many people with mobile phones but no access to banking, which also coincides with Facebook's commercial interests because that's the other billion or the next billion Facebook people, right? And who better to develop something like this, Marcus wondered, than Facebook with its global reach and massive user base. He was at the time head of Facebook Messenger, and he texted Zuckerberg saying, it's time to talk about creating a cryptocurrency. He wrote a memo that laid out his ideas, and Zuck quickly endorsed the plan, saying the approach synced with his ideas. They were thinking about this for a long time, and with Messenger, Apple has kind of in iMessages payment using
it's Huawei shows the path. Right. I mean, the Chinese model that you can do everything.
It's
you think of WeChat, not Huawei.
WeChat. Sorry, WeChat. Thank you. WeChat.
But this is more than that. This, I think, it would be a currency that Messenger would run on. Facebook Messenger would run on. But listen to it. I mean, so to your point, Jeff, what if we leave out Facebook, but we mention the other partners: Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Coinbase, Stripe, VCs like Andreessen Horowitz and Thrive, Kiva, which is that micro lending nonprofit, the NGO.
Even
Kiva.
though this will not be a lending platform, let's be quick to add.
Yes, but maybe the lending would occur in global coin is the idea.
Right,
Women's World Banking, Vodafone, eBay, Lyft, Uber, Spotify. These are all partners in this. No banks, of course, because if you're going to pick one victim of this, it would be banks.
Well, the other one that's not in there and it's not a victim, it's somebody who victimizes customers around the world, is Western Union.
Oh yeah, this would totally replace that.
That's one key to this.
I noticed M-Pesa isn't in there either, which is the African payment platform that is basically widely used in lieu of banks. But Stripe is in there, PayU is in there, PayPal is in there. So it's an interesting group. Mercy Corps, Ribbit Capital, Union Square Ventures. It's a really interesting group.
Stacey, you were trying to get in.
Yeah, so there's a couple things about this that we should look at. One is there's a lot of value in understanding what people are buying, what people are spending money on, and how money flows around the world, and seeing that in almost real time. It looks like, and again, I don't know the math behind this, but unlike something like Hyperledger, it looks like the blockchain process behind this, the math behind this, will make that sort of information public. So a company like Stripe, Spotify, even Visa and MasterCard, who actually already have access to this data, it behooves them to have something like this where they can see what people are buying. Two,
Facebook says that none of the information would go back to Facebook.
Right. I'm not just worried about Facebook. Okay. I'm curious what it means to make transactions public. So I've talked to people in like the FBI and about digital currencies, and they love this because you can find out who owns what and see what's happening. So there's a lot of information and data being available. Like if we're all excited about search data because that shows intent, this is like the next best thing. No, it's the more best thing. Gosh, I don't know what I'm saying there.
So Stacey, can you stay there for 1 second just so I understand what you're saying? So because it's on a blockchain, all the transactions are visible.
You can see all the transactions. Now, there are ways to make a blockchain private. I don't know if that's been done in this case. So what I'm pointing out are things that I would be asking and looking for.
So
there's two sides to that, obviously.
It's a ledger, so it's necessary that there be some identifying, well, not public, but there be identifying information with each transaction. But it doesn't have to be connected to your public identity. Just like with Bitcoin, it can
need an identity that you use in it.
It can be a number.
But you can find out who people are behind Bitcoins.
It's one of the things that surprised some people who thought that Silk Road and other places would be anonymous, is that you can't. I mean, I guess you can.
So going back, another thing to look at is the fees generated. Like, how are the participants going to earn money here? And the reason I think about that is we're taking banks out of the equation in this particular example, but someone like Visa or MasterCard is still going to want to have a processing fee, right?
Yeah.
So how do you build this in? And I think what we're looking at here, and we talk a lot about digital currencies, and I think one of the important things here is that it's going to be decentralized, which is awesome and scary. And 2, you can do microtransactions, which we've been like, oh my gosh, we can't do,
Yeah.
We've been waiting for this forever,
finally,
right?
the Messiah has arrived.
So
Microtransactions,
now,
yes.
right now we can't, because they talked about this, and I believe it was a Wall Street Journal article, had some good Q&As. I think it was only this particular, this could only do 1,000 transactions per second versus Visa's 24,000 transactions per second. So obviously this is not up to scale yet, right? But if you got to that scale, then you could look at something like, or even greater than that, you could look at something like microtransactions being more feasible. So I think there's a lot of things we don't know here. And I think, yes, it's probably safe to say that this is going to upend something and it's disruptive and blah, 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 all the words. But it's way too early and we don't know enough yet to say how it's going to be disruptive. So I'm just thinking of the questions I asked to figure out who's going to get.
So can I ask you another question, Stacey? So fees, as I said, I've talked to people in especially in African countries, plus also Latin America, where the diaspora sends money back home,
right?
And the fees and the conversion and the currency conversion, both there's all kinds of fees. That's
the Western Union problem.
Western Union and others, is fairly awful. So one would hope and presume that this does to that what Craigslist and others did to the horrible pricing of classified ads. But so there are fees in a simple Bitcoin transaction now. What do the fees look like? What's the base?
You could set it to what you want,
right?
And the higher you set it, the faster the transaction will occur. Because the transaction is done by the miners. So if there's more money in it for them, more coin in it for them, they'll do it faster. You'll get prioritized. You can set it as little as, I can't remember what it was, but 0.00001 Bitcoin, a small fraction of a Bitcoin. That's presumably how this would work as well.
Well, are there miners here? Or this is backed by...
That's who those $10 million participants are. I think they become the nodes on the blockchain. I haven't read the white paper yet. I think that's the idea. This was announced yesterday. There is a white paper which I will read, and I'm sure a lot of people who understand cryptocurrency better than I will. And by the way, France, US, and India has already introduced a bill that would ban it in India. Remember, this is somewhat similar to Facebook's Internet.org plans to bring the next billion people onto the internet through a specialized...
Which India went after.
And India said no.
Well,
they
Facebook
felt it was
wasn't going to launch this in India anyway, according to, it was a TechCrunch article.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay. I don't know if it's up to Facebook where it gets launched.
Well, let's put it this way. Supporting it on their platform for those users in specific countries.
Got it.
I mean, because that's what Facebook, if Facebook is truly independent from this, that's what it offers, is the fact that a lot of people are already there and Facebook will make it easy to convert, is my assumption. Facebook already has like my credit card information. So
Facebook's contribution to this at this point seems to be kind of inspiring and providing the code. But as Kevin Weil, who was an engineer at Instagram, he was a product chief there, who left to work on the project, said in the Wired article, Facebook will have but one seat on the council that oversees the foundations and will have no more rights, no more governance. That isn't exactly the same as everybody else has.
So, I like Stephen Levy. He's a smart man, but he also writes with access, and he never jeopardizes his access. Right. So he is the friendliest he is smart and he understands what's happening, but he is very friendly.
Okay. Fair enough.
I would.
There's other articles.
Now I'm going to read the white paper.
Yeah. Yeah. The white paper, of course, is the most interesting thing. And also this isn't happening till next year. I mean, the reason I'm interested in it is partly because it looks like a grab by Facebook for extra governmental power. It's almost as if Facebook, if Mark Zuckerberg said, well, obviously I can't run for president. What else could I do? Oh, I could be emperor of the world. and said, well, what about a global? I mean, really, isn't that interesting for Facebook? A global currency, but
I think that's interesting for everyone.
It's smart that Facebook is saying, but we are going to be one among equals. We are not going to be running this show. It is interesting for everyone. I mean, except the banks, but let's get rid of the banks. I don't have a problem with that. If we come up with
exactly. I mean, to be able to do transactions easily would be a wonderful thing.
Hold up. Okay, so there's a couple things. One, this is backed by actual assets.
Right.
That's not exactly unusual, but the direct link to the assets is probably worth noting.
I think they're really trying to solve the problems that they saw with Bitcoin.
Right. And with actual assets backing them up, this is predominant. I mean, this is a threat not just to banks, but also to the banking regulatory infrastructure and the protections set in place.
And state banks.
Yeah, well, anything. So like if you're the SEC, and if I put my money in a bank, for example, and, it is backed by up to a certain amount, it is backed by the U.S. government, right? Or FDIC insurance in a bank. If I buy bonds, that's backed by the U.S. government. So if I'm putting my money into Libra, that's backed by the Libra Association with some bank deposits in, it says, short-term government securities. With that, we introduce a new buyer, like on the short-term currency or short-term bond markets for, these assets. We kill. This is not a regulated entity at the moment. So there's a lot of potential for all kinds of things.
Malfeasance.
Not just money laundering, but malfeasance, or just a lack of understanding, which we see a lot in the tech community, which is like, oh, we could totally do this better. And then they're like, here we are with our, trading, basically our trading pool of money, and let's see what we can do with it. And, we've seen banks go astray with this, but that's why the SEC has, changed rules about how much money you have to have in reserve if you're going to do certain kinds of securities. So we'll see. I think those are more so, and I am curious about trust and stuff like that, but those are the kind of things where I think the real story is going to be.
So, Leo, let's go back to your point about the extra governmental piece here, because I think that in the long, whether or not this is the path that works or not, I mean, before this, we have Bitcoin, which is certainly extra governmental. We have wars fought over data, fought with cyber hacks now that is extra governmental. We have wars, in essence, fought with disinformation, which is sometimes extra governmental, sometimes not. The challenge to government and all this also fascinates me.
That's a huge
just conceptually. Why, so what services do governments provide? Well, they provided more security for currency, which Bitcoin didn't have, or was volatile. So along comes this consortium saying, okay, we'll fix that, and we don't need you, government. Now government's going to try to intervene, but at some point government's going to lose.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, these guys may they may blow through all their cash and not be able to pay back people on their they may not be able to back their security, basically. I mean, in some ways you're like, you have a lot of faith. Would I buy Venezuelan, are they pesos? I don't know. I would not right now, because that is
right. No, I couldn't agree more. I'm not saying that this is going to win. I'm just saying that the challenges to government are going to keep coming and coming and coming and coming.
So there's two parts of it. One is the crypto part. But the other part is just a non-governmental currency. Alipay in China is a non-governmental currency that's digital payments across social platforms, is in fact, because it's Chinese, believed to be part of government surveillance there. In fact, it seems, some say it's actually a critical part of their whole social credit system is Alipay. So there's always that potential, crypto or not. So, I mean, there's so many interesting the reason I think it's the story of the year is there's so many interesting facets to it. And to watch governments, which have pretty much ignored cryptocurrencies up to now, immediately step forward and say, oh, hold on.
Well, the SEC has been regulating token sales for a while now.
Yeah, but they're allowing it. They're not, what governments are saying now is, no, you can't.
Well, I think they're saying, let's look into this. Yes, there are bills being proposed, but I think that's a typical knee-jerk thing. I think what's going to happen is they'll use these as an excuse to understand and dig into this more, and maybe they will. And they're right.
Well, and also let's not forget banks spend a lot of money on Congress, and they may act to defend the interests of the banks. The banking industry is so powerful in this country. Look what happened in 2008. Remember all those bank presidents who went to jail? Oh, no, nobody did.
Well, the banking industry, but it's so intrinsic to our economy that they kind of had to do it. So an interesting option is...
I mean, that's what these blockchain guys are talking about as well. Is it intrinsic, or is it just a 19th century way of keeping track of who has what money?
Well, that's a really important thing to keep track of in a
capitalistic but what if we had a better
society?
way, better decentralized way?
Well, this might provide it. I would say, we're going to have to wait. I'm sorry. So we're going to go out on a limb here, but
Well, understanding, I should have prefaced this with, this was announced yesterday, and we're all just scrambling to understand what it is and what it means. I just think it's fascinating.
It is.
And I think you asked a really important question, Jeff, when you said, well, what if you took the word Facebook out of it? Then what would you say? The problem is without Facebook backing it, it's not nearly as interesting. It doesn't have nearly the clout.
I mean, hold on a second there. I mean, let's say two things. One, the internet has cooties right now with government and media, and Facebook has nuclear-powered super cooties. So, that's the timing is not great to do something innovative and disruptive.
This is another conversation, which I'll start after this, about what is Facebook up to. But go ahead.
Right. So it's really almost impossible to take those two factors out.
Yes.
But I'm just fascinated by the infrastructural question here about currency and what works and what's a better service for people. We've already talked about the international piece of this. If you could take out all the middlemen to enable, what do they call it when you send money back home? There's a word for it.
Money orders?
No.
Remittances.
Remittances. Thank you. Remittances. To make that smooth and take out currency transfers and other middlemen fees, that's a good thing.
But also to make people who don't have a bank account part of the economy.
Right.
So this is all good, except we still yes, the banks do not serve everyone. Yes, there are crazy fees, especially internationally, from rich companies going to poor companies. But I will also say that in many cases, like the US and other, like Sweden, places like that, the banks are trusted entities and they're backed by the government. That's one reason why in the 2008, we didn't let them go under as the US. Right. When you give that power to something else, which is fine, you may be dooming people who haven't had access to a bank account to using something like this without any regulatory oversight.
Yeah. Yes, all true.